welcome, I want to introduce Teresa Flanagan from Santa Fe, who's run many different programs throughout, especially in Santa Fe, but has also worked in the shamanic world down in Peru and trekked down there, as well as California, and has just been all over. She'll be telling her story, but she's a licensed professional clinical counselor and been a director for many programs and is in her own private practice, which I'm so psyched because I refer a lot down to Santa Fe, and therapists have a tendency of moving away, and she says she's sticking around. So please give applaud to Teresa, and thank you for being here.
Okay, so we're going to have to count on my voice being loud because I'm not going to do the whole thing like this. I would get uncomfortable and kind of cranky, and you would probably get kind of cranky too with me not being able to attend what's going on. So I'm Teresa Flanagan. I started actually in California. My first career was in banking, but my second career was in physical therapy. And I bring that up because it really turned out to be something that has really helped me as far as in psychotherapy. And that has a lot to do with, we keep hearing about how trauma and pain and whatnot is held in the body. Oh, I raised my hand, right? Because I was doing that for 30 years. I worked in California. I worked basically in trauma and head injury. I worked in Arizona for 15 years, a lot on the reservations, working with addiction, codependency, children, etc. I also taught at Northern Arizona University in their physical therapy program, particularly about pain. That was kind of my thing. And then can you read that okay? Sorry, I'm being codependent. And then I left Arizona 2004. I came here temporarily, and I said if I like New Mexico, I would buy a house, and I've been here since 2004. And again, as a physical therapist, began to work with people, that have had trauma, that have had accidents, that have had problems, as well as work with people that have physical problems and the grief and the trauma with that, and then also their families with that, and realized there was a lack in my part of being able to really work with their emotional pain and to recognize that that's just as physical. And why that was important was having a client that said, and she was lymphedema, breast cancer, etc., and she's in my office and she's crying, and I said, what's going on? She said, well, I went to the doctor today, he said, I'm cured. And I'm like, okay, and she sobbed some more. And then I said, well, why? And she basically showed me her body, and she says, does this look cured? And she says, my husband has left me, my body's deformed, and I'm in a great deal of emotional pain. And that made me change right away. I went back to school and got my degree in psychotherapy. And also coming from addiction background, both come by it legally, familial, generational, and recognizing what a part that addiction plays in how we react to pain. And I became extremely not just fascinated by it, but really having a lot of compassion for people who are going through the look almost fine on the outside, but inside they're just shattered and they're broken. And realize that as a physical therapist, you can say, yeah, do this exercise and let me massage you. But as a psychotherapist, it takes just paying really, really close attention to what is going on with people. And how in all those myriad of different ways, the people that you work with, the people next door, etc., that people are walking around having a lot of pain about their loved ones, as well as about addiction. And so when codependency, we're talking about it is the idea that you can recover. And I work at that every day. And I think that's, I believe I wouldn't be standing here and talking about this if I didn't know that you could recover from codependency, and you can recover from addiction, and recovered, not just, and then continued recovering, but really this concept of how can I live in the world? How can I move in the world and be a part of the world and not feel shattered and not feel hidden and not feel scared all the time? So, so that kind of brings me to when Lawrence talked to me. I've known Lawrence a long time, and he was catching me on the phone about something else, and then he mentioned this, and I took a couple of days to think about it, and then I was like, yeah, you know, this really is something that I feel not just passionate about, but the more community information that we can get out here, the better. Because you can look on the internet, and whatever view is going on, that's what you read. And all you get to hear is that you feel like you're broken, right? The codependency and addiction, you keep hearing, you're broken, you're broken, you're broken. You don't hear about the recovery, because recovery takes place outside the computer. It takes place in the community. It takes place with the resource of each other. And all codependency and addiction is all about isolation. Sitting by yourself at a computer, trying to figure out what's wrong with you, because you're ashamed and afraid of talking to somebody about that. Okay. So from there, I've introduced myself probably a little longer than you need to know. So I really want to thank everybody for sharing, because what that does is that lets you know that you're a group of people that are reaching out for help, and to recognize and look around the room that you have a lot of resources. You have a lot of other people that are, and I use the word, suffering from codependency, and that you're here to find out more about it and to relieve yourself of that. And that's what this is really about, is to give you some tools for that and some ongoing tools from there. So as you see, that was our introduction. Can you read that? I know it's hard to read.
No.
Okay, so what it says is she's introducing, and she says, all right, anxious Andy, OCD Olivia, I can't read the other. Anyway, wait, where is Codependent Carol? And it says she's out there sharing, she's out there trying to save people who don't want to be saved. So, okay. I'm sorry you couldn't read that. So let's look at what a definition is. And we know that there's a definition out there by ASAM, which talks about that it's an addiction, that it's just as much of addiction to people as it is to substances. And they classify it the same. You know, and I have mixed feelings about that. I want to be really honest that I had never thought of it that way. I had always thought, you know, addiction's addiction, and codependents are addicted to people who are addicted. And that's kind of as far as it went until I also went to CODA and to Al-Anon and to AA and started finding out that there was a different diagnosis, one that was actually not just a diagnosis, but a description that really helped me not feel like I was broken and messed up. Because almost everything you read is, and even though Pia Melody, she was kind of the person who started, and Melanie Beatty were people who started using that term in therapy, there was still a sense of, you know, I'm sort of broken and I need to do these things to get unbroken. And so I want to be really, really clear that when we're talking about codependency, I really see it as a series of mistaken beliefs about who you are, who your family is, and who your loved ones are. I want you to hold on to that and not think that I'm broken, that there's something wrong. You know, it's just a mistaken beliefs. If you would have done different, you would have done different. But while you get here, where you get to this point is when you realize what I'm doing isn't working. I keep making the same mistakes over and over again. I really want to do something different, because this hurts. It hurts here. And I can remember when I sat in meditation the first time about codependency, I thought I was going to have a friggin' heart attack. And I have to say that because, like, after a whole weekend of meditation, I went to the ER and said, I have a heart attack. I'm having a heart attack. And they said, no, you're not. And what I had to realize is that I was carrying that pain. I was carrying the pain of the sadness about addiction and the sadness for my family and the deaths that happened and the way people lived and talked to each other. And it was just, I just learned that and I carried those beliefs with me, and I carried them into teenagehood, I carried it into my first relationships, I carried it into taking care of my parents, I carried it into my marriage. I just kept carrying it until finally it becomes so painful. One of two things happen. Either you become completely a meltdown, or then you become addicted to some kind of substance, object, people, places, or thing because it becomes too painful. And that's why I'm a real believer that if you scratch somebody who is in recovery, you'll find that the codependency underneath that paint. And it's important to recognize that they really are kind of lock and key. And it's very rarely that somebody is just one and somebody else just the other. It's really important to recognize that you're kind of soulmates in the sense that you wake that up in each other and you can together work that out. And if you have a partner who's willing to work with you, you're in better shape than just trying to do it yourself. But having a community and other people work with it, I just cannot talk enough about the isolation that pain causes us of if people only knew. Okay. So this is sometimes that codependent relationship and two people just talking about, kind of accusations back and forth. You're not meeting my needs, and I don't want to meet your needs. And I think I'm doing everything I can. And, it kind of goes back and forth where two people who really maybe care for one another or their family members just can't connect, And it's like I said, it's sort of like lock and key, but it's a broken, rusty lock. And it's a key that may not fit right. So how I like to describe it is about behaviors. So codependency is when one person is over-functioning, okay? And they're over-functioning in someone else's life. And they're under-functioning in their own. So hold on to that for a second. So think about that. If you have somebody in addiction, how much are you taking care of their stuff? And how much do you not take care of yours? And what happens with that? What happens when you're not taking care of yourself? What happens when you don't take care of yourself?
You start to lose yourself.
Start to lose yourself. What else?
You get sick, mentally, physically, spiritually.
Yes. What else?
You get resentful.
You get resentful. What else?
You feel like a victim.
Yes.
Angry.
Angry. Yeah. And controlling, right? And you get told that it's you. Because somehow you think that you're broken in this. Because, that person that you're over-functioning for, you see their potential, right? Okay. And so seeing that potential in them, you don't have to pay attention to your own. And it's that process of relationship. It isn't brokenness, it's how you're processing, how you're trying to communicate, how you're trying to get what you want from other people. Or this is another part of it, or you're allowing someone to take over your life because it's easier. So remember, it takes two people. It takes that person who is overachieving in your life and the other person who is letting them, right? And in a way, you're kind of robbing each other. You're robbing yourself of your life and you're robbing another person. Okay. So let's talk about what it means to overfunction in someone's life. What does it mean? So you can be overfunctioning in someone else's life, and it's not about what you're doing, because you're giving, loving people, but it's about taking it too far. Okay, when you're overdoing, you're taking it too far. You're giving too much. You're fixing it all. You're caretaking them. You're helping them too far. You're serving them, okay? You're thinking for them, all right? You're speaking for them. You go to the ER with your son and you're telling everybody what's going on, or your daughter, right? They don't have a voice. They don't have to have a voice because you're over serving them. You're taking it over. You're controlling. I'm always reminded of the story of this woman that I heard talk in Coda, where she was so frustrated that she suddenly in the middle of the night when her husband comes home, she jumps on top of him, she grabs him by the ears, and she's hitting him on the pillow and saying, "Don't you know I love you?" Right? Because she just wanted him to stop what he was doing and love her. right? She wasn't getting the love she wanted, and she thought if she just got it from him, it would be okay. Okay. And then doing for the other person what they need to do for themselves. Calling in if they're sick, working for them, making excuses for them, etc. And why that's really important is that you can do that a little bit. When they're children, you have to do it when they're small, right? But there reaches a point where you kind of have to let go, but you're so afraid that they're not going to get it, that you're afraid they're going to die. You're afraid that they're going to leave you. There's so much fear in that moment that you just take it too far. And so here's love that really becomes like that toxic love that we talk about. Okay. And here's this cartoon. Sorry. I wish you could see them. They're really cute. So this one is saying, honey, I just don't think I can control your drinking anymore. Okay. So when you overfunction in someone's life, you keep the other person from growing. You keep them from being capable and responsible. We learn by mistakes. We learn by driving the car against the curb a couple of times before we realize, oh, we drive faster in the middle. And if we rob somebody of that, we keep them from being capable and responsible. Okay. This type of over-involvement hurts the development of another person. Okay. It hurts the other person to show up, but we get so afraid of loss. Grief may be part of that too, like that fear and that pain, because you're trying to limit the pain. And so you can be pretty powerful about limiting pain. If you're angry, that can feel pretty powerful, but pain feels so weakening. So we try all these things. If we just control it, hold our tongue just right, etc., we will help them into their best selves. And here it is where, at some point, these are super women. Here's Wonder Woman and who is that, Batgirl, and says at some point you have to realize that you really can't save them, right? But sometimes that's really difficult. Okay. And then there's underfunctioning in your own life. That's what pisses you off. It's like you're not taking care of yourself. You're tired, right? You're fatigued. Even as caregivers, we want it more than they do. We leave exhausted, and we're not like doing that good self. We tell them, go do self-care, go get a haircut, go get this. Let me give you some money. Let me give you. Okay. And this underfunctioning in your own life can include what can include? I could list it. When you have underfunctioned in your life, some of you talked about it, and that's why I think it was important that I know what's going on out there. What is the one thing that you feel? Resentment. What else?
Victim.
You feel a victim, right? What happens to your health? Who goes to the doctor first? They do, right? So it interferes with what else? What does it interfere with? Crickets.
Interferes with your living your own life.
Yeah, interferes with life, work, right? You lose time off of work. What else?
Interferes with love.
Interferes with love, being able to love them, being able to love yourself.
Personal growth.
Personal growth, yeah. You don't consider yourself in decisions, right? Okay. The development of physical or
self-esteem.
self-esteem, it just destroys it, yeah. And that's that physical elements, Sometimes you see where the codependent part of a couple, they are really, they're sick. They're not dressed well. They're not taking care of themselves. Okay. And there's all the ethical and legal problems, right? Do I tell somebody what's going on in my house? Do I talk about domestic violence? Do I talk about the drugs? And do I talk about how I'm feeling? No. There's bankruptcy, okay? And just the lying, and that just goes with that they're trying to keep their addiction going, and you're trying to chase them around and figure out what can I do to stop them. So although your intent may be to help others, okay, You underfunction on your own behalf, and it hurts the development of self. There is one other thing, and this is a place that I think when I heard it, I really snapped to, and that was this fact that if I was paying attention to somebody else, I didn't have to be responsible for my own life. And I did that for a long time, you know. They went to law school, they did this, I helped them do this, I was starting to help my children get their good grades. You know, I didn't have to pay attention at all to myself, right? So, and why should I? Because I've worked myself into this place of not deserving that for myself. All right, you can read this. Read it out loud. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. I have this in my office. Okay. So let's talk about the word recovery now. So recovery means that we're in recovery, we're focusing on ourselves, okay? And that we're trusting, this is a big thing, we're trusting others in their recovery. That's hard. When we're watching them crash and burn, we have to trust that they have some higher source, some higher power, some way in the universe that they're following their own thing, okay? That's really, really hard because that means I feel pretty selfish if I'm turning away, right? Like, yeah, they're in the gutter, I gotta go. And because there's no point in me laying down there in the gutter, right? There's no point in any of us laying down when somebody is crashing and burning. Okay, self and others. So these are ways to talk about codependency. It causes us to lose ourselves in someone else. You can see this little cartoon. 1 + 1 = 1 in codependency. There's really no life happening here. Okay. And also to remember that it doesn't remain static. You're not going to get it a certain way and you're going to be a certain way. You know, real relationships, they ebb and flow. They change. You grow, they grow. Maybe they go and you grow. You know, but to recognize you just can't hold on to that moment that you are going to think is perfect, that's going to fix you. And to get rid of that illusion that there's a moment out there that it's going to be all right. Okay. So yeah, so there's pieces in between that you put, but so it's not like you're like this, but it's also not like you're like this. It's touching, it's being interdependent on one another, but not totally dependent one on the other. So let's get into some recovery, okay? I don't like to dwell a whole lot on the problem, okay? Because we know the problem. We live the problem, we breathe the problem, we stay awake late at night with the problem, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you guys can tell me a lot more of your story around what has been going on in your life, but let's look at some healthiness. Okay. So, we're going to go through just understanding that we can build a healthy self. And when we do that, we start to realize that over-functioning in someone else's life and under-functioning in ours, we have to just start to change that behavior. And behavior means behavior means what? We just change what we do. Okay? We can't always change our thinking, and we may still be really scared, but we start changing our behavior so that we start being able to take care of ourselves and others. And that sounds so simple, doesn't it? But we know that it's not that simple. Okay? So we go back to this healthy self. So these codependent behaviors we talked about before, about giving and fixing and caretaking, helping other people, serving, being the harder worker. Sorry, stay back in the camera. People pleasing, thinking for others, speaking for others, taking over, controlling, doing for the other person what they need to do for themselves, and conflict avoiding. Everybody raise their hand if they got one on this list at least. Yeah. Okay. So those are behaviors. How many have more than one on the list? How many have 3 or more on the list? Yeah. You see that it's kind of a group of behaviors that have been happening. And you don't recognize sometimes, well, I just don't want to upset them. That's conflict avoiding, and that is codependent behavior. So it's important to know what it is you're going to get healthy from. Okay. So many of our codependent behaviors are not unhealthy. We want to be givers, right? We want to love people. We want to serve, but we just take it too far. So what we're talking about here is that we can do needs, but we can do the needs of other and balance with the needs of ourselves. But sometimes we've been so far down their rabbit hole that when we come out, we don't even know what we need. And this is part of, we'll get into like, what are some steps you can do toward figuring those things out. You don't even know what you want, okay? Do you know how you feel? Yeah, no? You get numb. You get pretty numb with that much pain. If you feel like you're gonna have a heart attack, you try really hard to get out of that body, right? If you feel like I'm just shaking all the time, I'm on drugs because they're on drugs, right? Or I'm doing meditation and sitting there like, please, I just want to feel good, but how do you do that in a balanced way? How do you feel? Okay. Your thoughts. How many have racing thoughts? Yeah. That's a big thing. Middle of the night, you got the committee sitting on the foot of your bed waiting for you, So recognizing that committee is external. How are you paying attention to yourself? And a lot of times your thoughts are just really kind of negative, right? You're beating yourself up all the time. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. Okay. So, and then also to balance your actions and their actions. And this is just kind of like looking at the fact you can do those things. They just kind of have to be balanced. And also the idea of spirit. You can't give somebody your God. They have to have their own. You can't give somebody your spiritual program. However, having your own spiritual program is really powerful. And I can't say that enough. That having your own is really a gift. It is another resource in which you are not alone. Okay, so this says, son, I completed all 12 steps for you, and they're in your bedroom with your clean laundry. Alrighty, so how do you work this out? So what's okay and what's going too far? Is first of all, talk about your resources, okay? You only have a set amount of resources, right? You only have a certain amount of energy, 24 hours a day. You may only have a certain amount of money. You may only have a certain amount of time, okay? You may only have a certain amount of gas in your car. You can't say, take my car and I'll fill it when you haven't even filled it for yourself. Going too far means that you're hawking your house, right? You're getting loans out for other people to get them out of jail, right? It's not your resources. It's they don't have resources, so I'll give you mine because I'm just trying to help you. That's going too far. But you can offer within your resources. So just kind of start, this is that idea of like, I want to give, wait, what do I really have to give? Okay. And also accept the other person's acceptance or rejection. Don't go, well, you need money. No, you need money. And you say, no, you need money. No, here, Hito, I'll put it in your pocket, right? So it's just really, it's really important to accept the fact that they may be trying to work on some independence, okay? And also about not insisting and not forcing your offer, your need, what you want to do to help them. I'll drive you to rehab, right? And you miss work. So, and also the idea of it's okay to make suggestions and then leave it alone. How many have asked once, twice, 10 times? You keep trying to force yourself on them, and don't insist on your suggestions. Okay, don't insist that you know the right way, because I will tell you, you do not know the right way for somebody else. Okay, you may for a small child. That's your job. That's when it becomes. It's not codependent. It's helping them make their choices so that they can be independent. But holding on to that is not. It's the difference between making a suggestion and actually taking it over for somebody, such as doing their homework, How many people have done homework for their kids, right? How many have done homework for their clients? How many have done something for them and let them slide on it, right? You're supposed to do that. Okay. It can be useful to think of codependency in terms of codependent behaviors. That's why I go back to this, rather than a label or a noun. Okay. So if you are saying, I am codependent, you're owning it, you might as well have a tattoo of it on your chest or forehead. Instead, just recognize their behaviors. Because you can change a behavior, right? How many have quit smoking? Right, in their life, right? You were able to change that behavior. That's kind of a powerful behavior, but you could change it. And if you thought, well, I'm a sick person who has to smoke the rest of my life, that's really, that's a death sentence for yourself, right? So to recognize that it's a behavior, and we can change behavior. So it's, for therapists, talk about behavioral therapy, but we're also talking about changing just one thing that you do, and overall. So of the suggestions I'll give, I mean, if you just take one of them home, it's going to be better. So when we consider this loss of self from a behavioral point of view, it helps us to see more clearly what we want to change. Okay, we're not going to change them, but right now you could change a behavior, right? Sitting in this room, you could change a behavior. That may be for somebody not checking their phone and making sure they're okay. All right. So let's talk about, how do we change behaviors? How do you learn something? How do you learn to tie your shoes?
Experience.
From experience, right. First of all, you had to get, and I compare this, being a physical therapist, there's such a correlation with the emotional part, and that is that it's a skill, right? First you figure out, oh, it's a good idea to tie my shoes. And then you get familiar with it, right? You get familiar with the fact that your shoelaces, what they look like, what they feel like, what it feels like to manipulate in your hands. So doing a new skill is like, getting familiar with it. Like, what would that skill look like? You know, pitchers, to get better, they not only throw the ball, but they stand there and watch mentally the ball go through the space that needs to go in, right? My son used to throw into a tire over and over and over again. And then he would stand there and I go, what are you doing? He goes, I'm mentally throwing the ball through the tire. Because what happens from a physical therapy point of view, that you do that, your muscles will respond. Your emotions will start to respond when you start thinking about and starting to be aware of these ideas. So throwing it away and just going like, yeah, just thinking about it, just thinking as a skill, okay? And then when you learn to tie the shoes about 2 bunny ears, and it goes around, and it comes out the hole, and you pull it tight. And you might say that over and over and over again, right? Until finally one day in your head, and not saying it out loud, you go, right? And then eventually, you and I are talking, and you just reach down while talking to somebody, and you tie your shoe. That's what how behaviors change. Just that simple. Just by first thinking about it, figuring it out, trying it, making some mistakes in it, and then figure out eventually that it becomes natural. For example, if right now you guys were all tired, okay, and you wanted to wake yourselves up, what would be something you might do? Just sitting here.
Stand up.
Stand up, okay. What else? Take a breath. So taking a breath naturally, pause for a moment, slow it down, finding a new behavior about how to do that, and do it and try it, and then, oh, I should have done it, and then, well, next time I'll do it, and, oh, I need to do it now, and then doing it. So this is where we're talking about skills. And so right now we're going to talk about 4 really important skills that can help you with the codependency. Okay. So there's a research study that said that there is commonly used definitions. And the big thing is you're externally focused, all right, that we're self-sacrificing, that we have interpersonal control, right, and we have emotional suppression. How many, when they read this, know that they have this? Yeah. You don't feel, you numb yourself, right? Interpersonal control, you're controlling other people and how they're feeling, what they're doing. You sacrifice. Don't you know I'm just doing this for you? And you have external focus. It's all about you. Okay. All right. So with these four core features, what's the antidote? Well, the opposite, right? So if you have external focus, what would be an antidote? Internal focus, right. If you're neglecting and overcaring of others, what do you do? Self-care, right. If you try to control others, what's the antidote? Self-control, right. And if you're denying and suppressing your emotions, go find those emotions, okay? And emotional, you'll hear terms of like emotional sobriety. And what you're talking about there is really this idea of not denying how you feel. And it's almost like tying a shoe. Wait, I have a feeling it hurts. I'm going to hold it longer. Or I'm going to cry. I'm afraid I'm going to cry and I'm never going to stop crying. Just to feel that feeling. And after a while, you learn to have the feeling. You learn to handle that feeling. Like, I'm going to cry for 5 minutes and then I have to go to work. Okay? And then after a while, you learn to hold that feeling. Yes, I can stand here and say, I have had profound sadness in my life. However, I'm still here. I hold it the same as I hold everything else. I'm not afraid of it. I'm also not afraid of joy. I'm not afraid of happiness. Okay? I'm not afraid of my feelings. But we get afraid of them because we get so afraid we're just going to start crying and never stop. We're going to be so sad. You see some heads nodding? Yeah. Okay. All right. So bringing the focus to yourself, taking care of yourself, managing, controlling your own life, and expressing yourself. Okay. All right. And so the way for this development is, these are four things I do on a regular basis in my clinic in order to just to start with people, is have a good, we'll have a break here in a minute. I think that's the break time, right? Okay. All right. So we're going to start, well, this is where we'll go in just a moment. We're going to have a break. But first of all, so the four things that really get codependency awareness is have a reality check. What are you doing? What are they doing? And we'll talk about that skill. The skill of self-esteem. It is a skill. And when you do it enough behaviors, you start doing esteemable things, you start building your self-esteem. The same with setting healthy boundaries. I heard several people talk about boundaries here. And then developing those resources. So right now, I would like everybody to check in with their body. And the first thing you can do, and this is this is at the tip of your toes, is you can rock your feet. Put your feet flat on the floor. And because when you cross them, you kind of like leave this energy out there. But if you're dropping your feet onto the floor, again, this is where I usually start with people, is just doing some rocking. You can also, if you want, just do yourself a little butterfly hug while you're doing that and comfort yourself. Okay? And of course, that nice deep breath, that deep belly breath, anytime. I mean, all of this is on the tip of your fingers, the tips of your toes, and the tip of your nose, is to recognize you have those tools. And we naturally use them, right? So when a baby gets fussy and you swaddle them, you put the right hand on the left shoulder, the left hand on the right shoulder, and you swaddle them. Oh, this is EMDR, right? This is where you're connecting two sides of your brain. Okay, so rocking your feet, just the very beginning of trying to calm yourself. And we can just do that anytime, all the time. I do it sometimes as a therapist, just rocking my feet while clients are processing things. I think that's really important so that we can just stay present for this. And as Ted talked about, that frontal lobe is keeping that really engaged. So we're going to talk about 4 skills. So this first skill is called reality. You have to do a reality check with that. You cannot yank somebody's curtains, somebody's blanket, right? You have to have the client, have yourself, start asking yourself these questions, okay? Because to point to somebody and give them a diagnosis of codependency with all this, I'm not codependent, you start in a resistance right away. So the person has to start to notice it themselves. It's their self-awareness. It's not yours. You may notice it. If you have a friend, if you're starting to notice it in yourself, are you saying these things? Why can't you be what I want you to be, right? Why can't they see what I'm doing? At least, and I don't understand why people don't appreciate my good advice. And this statement right here is this awareness. The one who loves the least has control of the relationship. That's pretty powerful. And to start watching that, they don't love me and I love them more. I start listening for that. So to see it where you're going to have a little bit of an end with yourself and with the client. Okay. So why don't you raise your self-esteem so I can raise mine, right? So facing reality is allowing yourself to see what is true about yourself and your situation. To read this up here is one thing, but to check down deep inside of yourself, what is going on? Am I living on the hope that somebody's going to change? Right? That's the whole focus sometimes. Do I accept unacceptable behaviors? No. Do we believe we are helping when we're really hurting? And ask those pretty straightforward questions of ourselves in any situation. It's like that. It's like cutting into what's really going on and paying attention to that. Okay. And just remember that the reason why you can't yank somebody's covers really fast is because they're focusing on somebody else. Sometimes they're not focusing on themselves. And that's kind of painful, right? Is to realize I've been doing this and not paying. Sometimes you don't even know you're doing that. But be really careful about recognizing, oh, you're in pain, and it has really helped somebody to figure that out and to be gentle with yourself. That whole gentleness about facing reality. Okay, and also facing illusions is working through our denial about what is and what isn't. So anyway, finding the reality is find the reality and the truth about yourself. Is walking through that with yourself, walking through that with your client. What does your life look like? And sometimes it's mirroring back that, yeah, that sounds really sad. And they're like, yeah, it is sad. It is really, and to be able to walk through that on yourself is like, yeah, that's a really sad scenario. Okay. And also the truth about the other person. What is really going on? Well, they're a good person, but they've been out of jail and they stabbed this guy, right? And sometimes we want to have that good view because we think if we think bad about them, there's something wrong. It's the difference between thinking bad about them, like judging them, and just knowing that they may or may not be in their addiction. Okay. And then checking in with yourself, to find out, how am I feeling about this? Wow, yeah, this is sad. Oh yeah, this really hurts, And then some people will do that and then pop right back out, right? Where you're like, okay, I have to go clean the bathroom, right? I have to get away from this. And so gently walking yourself in it and walking your clients through this. I spend a lot of time doing reality because until somebody knows what's going on, they're not willing to change, right? That's denial. When you're not in reality, you're denying. So, and to ask that question, well, how are you acting? Oh, how are they acting? Like separate the two of you. Separate the two people or the family involved, right? What are they doing? What are you doing? You know, that's the reality. That's like taking a lot of stuff out of it. Okay? It's taking out the right and the wrong. It's just talking about behavior. So it's important, first of all, to like understand the reality of what's going on and to have some sympathy and compassion for yourself and talk about it. Because sometimes that painfulness of really recognizing, oh my gosh, I'm really stuck, right? I'm stuck in their behavior and I can't talk to anybody about it. Find your resources, find your therapist, find your friend, find those people that will understand and support you and not judge you and not say, oh, you need to leave them, right? Okay. And the other part is allow those feelings. Allow them. You're really not going to die from feelings. But sometimes we feel like it. Like I said, I felt like I was going to have a heart attack, you know, when I got some quiet meditation and really thought about how sad things were for me. So going at them a little bit at a time. Sometimes I do it like for 5 minutes and it's like, okay, that's enough. You know, it's kind of like you have to titrate it. You have to do it slowly. All this happened really slowly. It all happened like a slow fog that initially you can see everything and then it got kind of misty and after a while you couldn't even see across the room. But you didn't notice how that happened. And so again, really doing this nice, slow to help somebody, to help yourself, not deny the feelings and how to express them safely. You know, if you're angry, you know, I was taken to an arroyo with a whole flat of eggs and I had to throw those eggs into the arroyo and yell because I had some anger that I just, you know, it just wasn't nice. It wasn't ladylike. It wasn't kind. You know, I had talked myself out of those feelings. And I'm okay telling you part of my story, you know, in that sense, how I'm telling that. Not because anything special, but because to let you know that I know what I'm talking about. I've watched people walk through it. And, you know, just sometimes it stays there for a long, long time. And sometimes you stay in a relationship and then you're out of it and then you move on. But it's still there, some of that codependency. And again, when the unintended consequences of that suppression is expressed anger turns into depression. And depression turns into, right, feeling unworthy. And that's really, I mean, I can say that's the behavior, but a neurotransmitter is really starting to act out then, right? Because when you're depressed, you're not making serotonin. You're not even able to make dopamine. You burned out your adrenals. Dopamine is not available to you. So, you know, this whole idea of really getting, feeling those feelings. And then starting to move into reality. Really help people find the process of accepting that reality. And accepting yourself. And stop thinking that you're broken. And stop thinking that they're broken. Is just recognize this is a whole bunch of mistaken beliefs. We're both like thinking it's okay for me to do this, but it's not. And it's okay for them to do that, and it's not, because it's not working for me. Okay. And it's just learning to make decisions that are healthier. Okay. You can only do that if it's real, right? All right. So, just for a moment, I would like everybody to just kind of close their eyes. And I want you to just touch on a moment of reality for you. Something that you know that even though you're not happy about it, that it's real. Okay. And how you feel about it. Notice how you're feeling about it. Just take a moment to notice it. If it is too disturbing, move to something else. Okay. But find some point of reality. Okay. And how you're really feeling about it. Okay. All right. And when you're doing that, I want you to recognize how your behaviors were mistakes, mistaken beliefs about who you were and who they were. And then to recognize that sometimes these are learned behaviors. You may have seen other people do it. You may have had the idea, the false idea, that a good mom would do this, a good wife would do this. And then look to see where else in your community that you have that idea from. And how it blurs that reality of who you should be. And the reality is, you're a human being who is allowed to and needs to make mistakes in order to learn how to do a journey. And so this is how you start to get a perspective on what's going on. You sit quietly and feel it in a safe way. And if you're feeling a little agitated, you rock your feet. Or you do this with a therapist or with a friend or in a group, right? But sometimes it's safe enough just to sit with it. And it's not about coming up with what you need to do about it, okay? You don't need to do anything about the feelings. They're yours. Feelings, you have 5 fingers on each hand, hopefully. You have 2 legs, everybody in here does. You have feelings, right? You itch like everybody else, okay? You have to go take care of your food needs, okay? And you just go do that. You don't think this is my last meal. This is the last time I'm gonna do this. I need to do this forever, right? It's just something that you can feel for that moment. And you have a moment of detachment. You're not in it. You're not triggered. You're not responding or reacting. And it starts to help you see things a little more clearly. Okay. And then talk to somebody about those. Again, check your ideas. Check your beliefs. Check them in. Check them out. Okay. And it starts to allow you to respond to something and not react. Okay. So if you're having scenarios is going on, is just to stop with them for a moment. And it's sort of like my son taking that football and throwing it into the tire over and over, so that you can start to know that you're safe and you didn't, fly away. You didn't explode. You didn't transform. Right? And sometimes you can do it for 5 minutes and then go, deep breath. So everybody right now, just take a deep breath. Okay. So, and now you can move on to something else. So you can give it its due for a moment, a little bit at a time, and then come back to it. Okay. So then you become aware of what's entangling you. Why did it go twice? What's entangling you? What's hooking you? What the real problem is. And it's not you and it's not them, but it's the behaviors that are going on. It's the process that you're using to try and solve some inner stuff, some communication problems. And also recognize that, sometimes we're just afraid. Sometimes we're afraid that it's not going to come out right. And you know what? It may not come out right. Loved ones do die, or go to jail, or don't ever talk to you again. It happens. Okay. So being afraid of that, as opposed to just saying it, yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. It makes it less scary, because I'm sitting going like, yeah, if that happened, would I really die? No, but I'd be really, really sad. Okay, hold on to that feeling. Know that I had that feeling, and I'm still here. I'm still standing. You're also sitting in this room. Okay. Also looking at the roles, I talked about this. We can look at the roles of this family of origin, what our mom did, our grandparents, they lived together for 50 years. They fought every day, right? And so recognizing I don't want to fight every day, but I want to be married for 50 years, right? You got to choose sometimes, right? So, and also about, there's these ideas of archetypes, am I the victim? Am I the perpetrator? Am I the savior in all of this? Or there's also the archetypes of the hero, the lost child. What role are you playing? What role is is, have you been modeling an overfunction? Okay. Because it's some kind of attachment thing that's been going on. Okay. Also, this is a big thing. Look at your motives. Why are you doing it? Why do you keep doing this behavior? You know, that's part of the reality check. It's like, God, why am I doing that? Because I want to be happy, and you're going to make me happy when you stop, la, 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 right? So just recognizing that, watching for your motives and not being afraid. So also being aware of your past. You know, our past sometimes can come back to haunt us. We can't leave it. It's there. We can't replay it, but we have to know that we're carrying it with us. And sometimes it's a shock, like, man, how did I end up having the same relationship as the last one, right? So it's just by becoming aware of these qualities that you have had, you know, that maybe it was a relationship as a child where you watched it happen. Or maybe you're parentified. Anybody know what parentified means?
Yes.
It's where you became the parent because maybe you had parents that were depressed, addicted, mentally ill, you know, so you can be codependent in that way. Well, I needed to be the parent, you know, and so sometimes I'm looking for love because I didn't get it there, and it's like that cowboy song in all the wrong places, right? I'm trying to plug into those people that need help, right? So becoming aware to those qualities of somebody feeling hopeless and weak, you know, and I want to help. Then I got to check that motive. It's like, oh, put my hands in my pocket, right? Stay away. And that also goes as being a therapist. It's like sometimes you have to put your hands in your pocket and nod. That's the reality of their reality. Okay. And the reality is sometimes, yeah, I want to help, but I also know that that feeling is not going to help them. Okay. So, and just for a moment also, and this is for you on almost some homework, is just kind of look at your basic tendencies that are causing these behaviors. Are you feeling a little needy? Are you feeling vulnerable? Do you feel like you can't do it on your own? You know, what's kind of going on with those things? And look at your caretaking. And especially with even that one activity that would kind of follows in with that idea of looking at, you know, that one piece of reality, looking at all those pieces. Okay. And then eventually you start to respond and don't react. In AA, they call this pause when agitated or doubtful. Okay. We also talk about just quietly listening and pay attention to what's going on. We also talk about observe, if possible. Okay. Just watch the show, so to speak, without judging it, without thinking this is bad, I'm bad, or I'm good and they're bad, or they're good and I'm bad. We go right to that, right? We go right to making a comparison. And so really being careful to like watching a movie. And sometimes you can just pause the movie. Sometimes you can say, I gotta go to the bathroom. I gotta go wash my face. I gotta get a drink of water. So it gives us time to process rather than go right into it, right? Because if we're doing that, we're not thinking about what's really going on. So this is working on these skills. And so one of the things is if you're a therapist and you want some of this information, my email and my cards are down here, so and my email's on there, so I will send that to you if you're a therapist. Okay. So again, this is kind of looking at this activity. All right, so the next thing is developing self-esteem. So here you are in reality now, and you're thinking, oh, I'm so sad. So now you're going to work on developing self-esteem, and there's some ways to do this. That what does it mean? It means changing how you talk to yourself. How many have called yourself a bad dog, right? I'm doing it wrong, okay? So I say things to myself that I wouldn't admit that those words even come out of my mouth. So it's really watching how your internal dialogue is, okay? And it's about forgiving your mistakes, okay? And just knowing, you know, and challenge those negative beliefs. There is a really good skill that I have started to work on, and that is when somebody comes up with a negative belief, is immediately, as opposed to dwelling on that, is say, is that a mistaken belief? And if they do, so what would you do with that mistaken belief? Well, I would do something positive. Tell me a positive belief about that. I'm doing the best I can. Now sit with that and breathe for a few minutes that you have a positive belief that I'm doing the best I can. So that each time that negative belief comes up, you can change that direction pretty quick. But it is some self-awareness. If you start, I always know when I start thinking I'm talking, I used to call myself the bad dog. Bad dog, bad dog. When I would catch myself doing that. I did that as a kid, maybe because my parents would yell at our dog all the time. But when I know that's happening, it's like right away, when I catch that, it's like, no, I'm just a human being. I'm doing the best I can. And then I hold on to that positive thought. And you can change neurotransmitters right away. You can change that quick of a behavior. Just in that, doing it over and over. And how long does it take to change something from a moment to a habit? 21 days?
2 weeks.
2 weeks? Yeah. So pretty quick you can change that. Okay. Oh, here's this cartoon. And it says, you promised that you were going to start taking care of yourself. And he says, I am. I just took a vitamin after eating 2 deep-fried Twinkies, washing down a Flintstone vitamin with a Coke. So it is this idea of like, you sometimes you can do a little bit, and sometimes you're still drinking the Coke and the whole Twinkies. So the things that get in the way of self-esteem is to look at perfectionism, okay? Perfectionism will kill you because you're not going to be perfect. Sorry, although it's that new idea. But really no, don't do it perfect, do it messy. Let people be messy. You be messy. Give yourself permission. Give them permission just to be messy. And recognize there's really something different between not being able to do something well and being a bad person or being a failed person. Okay? Some people go and take the bar exam 6 or 7 times. And at the end, when they pass on the 6th time, what are they? A lawyer. What if they pass it on the first time? They're a lawyer, right? So it's about learning about that. And stop sweating that small stuff. Get away from that perfectionism and catch yourself. I want to do this perfect. I want to be the perfect therapist. I want to be the perfect mom. You're really setting yourself up to hurt your own self-esteem. So that really gets in the way. Body image. I don't know if I can go back. It's acting on its own. So the other is body image. Just take care of your body. Sometimes it's like, oh, I don't have a nice body. Well, this is a vehicle to get us from place to place. And to start comparing and saying, I need to look like this or that. Teenagers do that because they do have low self-esteem. And how do you, as a parent, help them? Is help them not think that being thin or being tall or whatever, being clean, dressing and taking care of yourself, brushing your hair, caring just about yourself. Those things can really help with that body image. And then there's being oversensitive. How many here are really sensitive people? Yeah, I'm really sensitive. You're going to hurt my feelings. And what's sad about that is that we sometimes really misinterpret what somebody's saying. So if I say, I like what you're wearing today, my negative thinking might be, what? Do I look like a slob all the rest of the time? Right? So sometimes it's our own filter. It's our own filter of self-esteem. Taking those compliments. Also standing up for yourself. If somebody says they don't like your shoes, I can go, oh, should I change them? Or I can go, oh, I like them. Right? It's to stand up for that. Also, if somebody tells you you're not good at this or not good at that, that's what they're doing. And remember, that may be a codependent and a relationship that you need to know the reality of what's going on in there, okay, and what you can do. Also, be proactive. If there is some truth in it, if I have a stain on my dress and I try to hide it, right, I'm not really telling the truth, right? But if I go like, yeah, spilled coffee on myself, right? Just know that there's some truth, but also take sometimes as constructive criticism. If somebody tells you you're controlling, don't just start with no, okay? Instead, it's like, I'll take that in consideration, right? That's somebody who has self-esteem and just doing that behavior, just not going right to, I don't want to hear it because I'm doing the best I can. Instead, it's like, yeah, maybe that's what's happening, and check in with yourself. And that's why you want your resources. That's why you want to talk with other people, to ask your sister, am I controlling? And she may say, yep. I'm glad you asked. I've been waiting for a long time for you to ask. So just watching on, sometimes being oversensitive can really affect our self-esteem. Okay. And then there's our self-worth. I have to go back to that. Except that we all come with our own unique qualities. You know what? There's not a person in this room that look like each other. There's not a person in this room that I would mistake for somebody else. Okay? Not just by your dress, but what you say, what your story is, etc. So just know you have unique talents. Okay? My unique talent is I can talk about anything. And if I know about it, I can talk about it for an hour. And I'm not ashamed of that. I'm also know, hey, I have a unique talent that I won't do it. I can touch my tongue on the tips of my nose. So stop thinking that others are better. Just because you guys can't doesn't mean that I'm better than you or that you think I'm weird. Okay? And be aware, I say this all the time. We teach people how to treat us. Okay? We teach them how. And we can teach them in a mean way, like, you said what? Or you can say, excuse me, what did you just say? There's ways to say that. There's ways to say it cutting, and there's ways to say it kind. Or I didn't appreciate that. That might be giving them ammunition, right? Instead to just say, you can't talk to me that way. I've taught you how to, I'm teaching somebody how to treat me. Okay? If somebody's yelling at me, you can't yell at me. Well, what are you going to do? Oh, watch, I'm going to leave. So this is, again, that sense of self-worth. And it is part of these ways of building your self-esteem. And fear and anxiety, we've talked about that. We've been living in fear for a long time. So this fear and anxiety is really challenge that anxiety with some facts, right? If they leave me, am I going to be ruined? Really? If they die, am I going to die by their addiction? If they lose this job, if we're bankrupt, what does that mean? I'm going to be homeless. Well, probably not, So it's just really looking at what the evidence is and slow that down. Again, that's self-esteem of not jumping to the worst scenario. And build confidence by facing your fears. Sometimes it's turning to the fear. Can be really difficult. And you might do it for short periods of time, like, okay, I'm going to face my fear of public speaking. Okay, and I'm done, right? So just that, be gentle with yourself. You're building something slowly that slowly you lost, or maybe you never had. But you get to be the adults here, and you get to be responsible, and you get to change your behavior. Again, you're just changing your behavior. You're not changing who you are. You're amazing who you are. It just sometimes we do some things that we're not happy with, and it's not making us happy, and it's hurting us. And boundaries. We're going to talk about boundaries. Okay, we're going to stop here for a moment and talk about boundaries. So, what are boundaries? What are they for?
Respect.
What?
Respect.
They're for respect.
Safety.
They're for safety.
Knowing the difference between myself and others.
Okay.
Where the line is.
All right. Has anybody ever thought about the fact that boundaries are not about keeping people out? How many think boundaries are about keeping people out? They're about keeping you safe. I love that you said that word. I talk about that. That's so important. How do I keep my self-esteem safe? How do I keep my well-being safe? How do I keep the way I take care of myself safe? So in Maslow's hierarchy, right, this little triangle, and the first thing at the bottom says you got to have food and shelter, right? The next thing says you got to be safe. And the next thing you build on is relationships. If you're not safe and you're in a relationship, that's a lot of anxiety that is a lot of ways that you are not feeling safe or trust yourself or trust the other person. Okay? Trust is a big thing there, yes.
So for us men, the norteños, macho man, ego, one of the things about boundaries that came to my attention was growing up in a violent environment or very rowdy, there was a thing about high tolerance for unacceptable behavior. And us men of El Norte, we need to be, we have our pride and ego and the way we talk, the profanity and that unacceptable behavior that in recovery of learning boundaries to say, but deep down inside, I didn't like that. I wasn't comfortable around it. But yet that was the norm of high tolerance for unacceptable behavior. But as in recovery and recognizing that, but looking at those boundaries, and when I got into recovery, that I really didn't feel comfortable anymore to be around those type of people. And then I thought I was, betraying them when I decided that this was not my lifestyle, the gang life, the Vato Loco life, I'll die for you, brothers for life, and that just wasn't my cup of tea anymore. And that now I have a low tolerance for unacceptable behavior. And setting that, even as a man,
Right.
that was big for me because being the macho man that I thought I was and what I grew up in, it didn't serve me well.
So you started to recognize and have a reality check that it was not safe, and you started to recognize that that was a role that you played. It really wasn't yours. It was a story that you carried. Yeah. So when we're talking about keeping ourselves safe, I want you to visualize a castle, okay? A castle. I have my castle. All right. When they build castles, what were they building castles for?
Security, protection.
Huh?
Kings and queens.
Kings and queens, to keep them safe, right? To keep the hordes away, right? Because the kings and queens ruled the kingdom. That's where the gold was kept, right? That's where the horses were kept. All those things that's where the soldiers were kept, right? They were all inside. The idea was to keep that kingdom safe. Okay. And then what happens is you have a drawbridge, right? Somebody decides, halt, who goes there? Who is doing that? Self-esteem. Halt, who goes there? Oh, no, you can't come in. Yeah. Okay. And the other thing is to recognize that the idea of holding myself valuable, full of self-worth, self-esteem, and that this deserves, as everybody else deserves, to have their own castle. And your castle has to be reinforced though, because if you have a stick castle or you have a chain link fence castle, right, people are just going to step over. And if you give people ladders to come into your castle instead of coming through self-esteem, right? So you start to recognize that I need to shore up my fence. And how am I going to shore it up? I'm going to shore it up by one, self-esteem. We're going to go into here now. Okay. All right, developing boundaries. It means setting some limits. It means setting some limits for yourself. And I keep going back to self. What you will and will not tolerate in a particular situation. Am I safe? Number one. Am I safe emotionally? Am I safe physically? Okay. Am I safe mentally? Am I safe spiritually? Really check in with what a boundary means. What are you keeping safe? What is your gold? What are your kings and queens? Okay. And setting boundaries means that you can listen to yourself and figure out whether or not you need to open that drawbridge and let them in, or self-esteem can say, no, you can't come in, and close it. And that's what kind of gauges who comes in and who goes out. And if you can visualize that, but I also want you to visualize, in my castle, I have stones. I have stones like this big, okay? And my stones, what they are is they reinforce my castle, okay? My stones are my reliable people, my therapist, my meetings, okay, my spiritual beliefs, all those things are reinforcing my esteem. They're reinforcing my boundaries. And so if you can recognize that we have boundaries, but if we're not reinforcing them with other people, with reading, with educating ourselves, with going to we'll talk at the end about resources, but if we're not doing that, we're not protecting that. We need to not just have it, but reinforce it. Self-esteem needs to be reinforced. It needs to be checked. We need to do reality checks. And we need to have other people with other castles that are protecting themselves as well. Because sometimes that's a united front. If you have a lot of people that are like, I'm gonna say no, I'm gonna take care of myself. And it's not always about saying no. I'd rather not. I don't want to. I don't have to. All those are I's. All those are what I am protecting. Because no one else is going to do it. And if I can reinforce that with some really good resources and visualize that castle, visualize what is inside and how that is really valuable, and how we can be valuable therapists, we can be valuable parents, we can be valuable friends, we can be valuable wives and husbands. Okay, so there are two sets of skills that go with boundaries. First, listen to yourself. Okay, listen and feel yourself. If you got a red flag, you listen to that. You know where your red flag is. In your head, you go, that didn't sound right, right? Or, I don't feel good about this. I don't feel this, right? Listen to yourself. If you think something is weird, that's one thing. If you feel something is weird, I listen to that feeling. Your body is so much a part of, and we think our way in and out of, but we don't feel. And so to feel that, to have that skill of listening to yourself. And then watch how you interact with the other person. If you recognize that you can't be yourself, your authentic self, you're afraid, you have fears around that, anxiety comes up, being oversensitive comes up, all those self-esteem things that we just talked about before, if those things start coming up, you need to recognize that somehow that boundary, that I need to go back and reinforce that castle to make sure I'm keeping that safe and to really watch my interaction. Okay. And how you do is listen to yourself, just slow down. Just stop the music for a moment. Listen to you. You can hear the voice of the other person. You're a failure, you're this, you need to do this for me. But you need to be quiet just for a moment. Inside, even if you've got noise going on, is bring yourself back inside. That's why you want to have a safe place to come back inside to. Okay. Listen to your body. Listen to your mind and scan your body, just as if it was an MRI. Ooh, right? Okay, and feel your reaction. That's why when we first talked about you have to feel, right? The reality is helping people. So helping them with reality, helping them or ourselves with self-esteem, and then really looking at listening to that. Okay. Create I statements. I cannot afford to do that. It has nothing to do with the other person. It doesn't have a judgment for you. It doesn't have a judgment for them. So breaking down, if I feel like I need to say something and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna rehearse it. No, can't say that. I want you. No, can't say that. I have to slow it down and stop long enough to get that I statement out there. I can give you a couple of hours, right? I have to be done at this time. Yes, I will drive you to here, but that's all I will do. And why that's really important, because this is, again, the expressing yourself. It's one more place to reinforce your boundary. And setting boundaries, and you can do it healthy and friendly. How many know how to do healthy, friendly boundaries? Yeah, we're not good at it. When we're reacting, sometimes we're not good at it. Because we're like, okay, I gotta have a boundary here. What am I, right? I gotta tell them no, I don't know how. It's okay to make a mistake and go, next time I'll do it different, okay? Don't get caught up with, I gotta do it right. Really go with that gentleness around, about those relationships and interactions, that you've done something for a long time. You slowly are learning how to, remember, tie that shoe. Okay. Where no longer do you have to, 2 bunny ears, right? Okay. Our children need boundaries. And so sometimes so do adults that we interact with. We teach people how to treat us. We go back to that. Okay. And once you get that, it's kind of edit your I statement. I always make, if I'm really angry, it has to be 25 words or less. If I am just a little bit angry, it has to be like 7 words or less. I edit myself. I gotta edit myself. You guys, I talk forever, right? And rehearse it, say it out loud. Call somebody and say, I want to say this, how does this sound? Get some help. You do not have to do this by yourself. Okay. And each of these steps will help you. Okay. So it's healthy. Brennan, I did it again. Okay. All right. And stick with your limits. How many says, I'm just going to do this, right? And then, oh, come on. Oh, I want to help you, and I like you, and you're cute, and yeah, okay, right? I'll give you that money, Just remember, you have a reason for this boundary. What's the reason for your boundary?
Safety.
Keep yourself safe. It's just not physical self, it's self. It is keeping yourself safe. Okay. And learn when to stop. Sometimes it's when to stop a conversation. Okay. We can save ourselves so much just to go, done. I'm done. Okay. To keep trying to talk them into your way of thinking, it's just another way of controlling. Trying to get your way versus, I don't want to do this. And stop. Okay. And we are not going to be able to do this little activity, but it's talking about doing a line down the middle of the page. If you've got something that's going on, put a line down the middle of the page. Write down what your stuff is, write down what their stuff is, and see how close you can get to the line if you want without crossing the line. And if somebody pushes something over to yours, like you need to take care of it, it's okay to push it back on their side. Okay. So this is a really good activity to do with your clients and with yourself, is to draw a line down the middle when you've got some controversy going on, some piece that you want to work on. Is this is mine, this is them. Oh, what is it that I'm doing for them? And what is it I'm not doing for myself? Okay. All right, developing resources. Okay, so this is the other part. And I've talked about it from the very beginning. When we started in this, we also started with introducing ourselves. Look around the room. There are other people who have codependency. There are other people who work with codependency. There are people there to help you, and you can help other people. Okay. Allow other people who understand to support you. Okay? Don't be ashamed. You don't have to be in pain. Nothing's harder for us than when somebody has hurt themselves or killed themselves because they felt all alone. We know what that's like. It's like, oh, that's a shame. But we all know those dark moments, and we do need to reach out. And we reach out to other people when we see that they have pain. Okay. So just recognize and coming to terms with reality, letting go of illusions, and working on skills. And those are part of developing your resource. And one is Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay. That's a really good resource because, again, you scratch anybody in AA and you see that codependency both ways, either way. Okay. There's Al-Anon, which is for those that have family members who are alcohol and substances. There's also CODA, that if you grew up with, if you grew up in a house that you were codependent and you want to work on that, that's really a wonderful resource. There's also doing spiritual pursuits, your church, meditation, yoga, anything that turns you on, anything that you can connect with something. Nature, sitting under a tree, going out hiking. Those are spiritual pursuits. Those are things that fill you. Those are resources. And sometimes just laying down on the ground is such a resource. It's such a beautiful resource. You know, don't be afraid to lay down. I lay down in my office sometimes between clients. It's like, whoo, okay, and I lay down. I also have I have a little backyard, and have set up a little area where I just lay down. I just go out there and sit. You know, that's a resource. And just remember, we have trees out there, right? And when the trees start moving, that little movement right there is such a soothing and calming thing to the retina and the brain. That totally changes your neurotransmitters. Just to watch that. Also, individual therapy. If it's something that you really want to work on and get some skills and get some help and get some support. Therapy, you know. In this state, there's just no reason why somebody can't get some help in that area. And the same with group therapy. Talking in a group. I run a really small group of women that usually meet about 6 weeks. And it's small so that they can talk about these things, and it's working through their recovery. And they really seem like they feel so unalone, you know, and they feel like, okay, I can do this. So, you know, you can. Also books, Codependent No More, Beyond Codependency. There's also the, what is the one? Codependence for Dummies. There's a workbook. There's the New Codependency. The Shame That Binds You. These are kind of some really strong literature that are helpful. They're a lot of go-to. A lot of therapists use them. A lot of times you recommend them to clients. And to sit down and go through that workbook, but also do it with some gentleness and kindness, just to get some support. The other is looking at authors, looking at TED Talks, looking at YouTube. Brene Brown, Oprah Winfrey on her Super Size Sundays are really good. Elizabeth Gilbert also really right. She comes from a really strong therapist background. And then Marianne Williamson, which is really a spiritual giant in the idea of codependency and using a spiritual answer for that. And then dare. You know, I want to challenge you. I want to dare you, you know, to do some self-care. I want to dare you to, you know, make a mantra, do something that's good self-care, do something that reminds you to be in your body. You know, I have a ring and it goes around, and when I do this, I just remember that it, you know, things just go around like that, like the sun sets, the sun rises, etc. That's really helpful for me, like a mantra. It's going to be okay, whatever your mantra is. Remember to keep a journal. Rehearse to no one particular. You drive down the road like, no, I cannot do that. No, my plate is full. So, I mean, these seem silly, but they're just little behaviors that start that. All right. In summary, your goal is to develop a healthy self. Okay, that's your goal. Your goal is codependent behaviors can move us out of balance with that. Okay. Find a healthier balance. That's your mission. And that's what you're daring yourself to do, both as a clinician, as a family member, as having loved ones in the past. The person in the grocery store, you know, that you know she's drunk, you know, and to find out you're not alone in this journey. And so my blessing to you is that may you all live in the reality of your journey with a healthy self-esteem, that you trust yourself to protect yourself with appropriate boundaries and support your need to be happy. Thank you.